Power rarely looks like a crown. Sometimes it wears a spiked Prussian helmet and a scowl that can freeze a diplomatic room. He was the architect of modern Germany, the man who bent kings, outsmarted emperors, and redrew the map of Europe through raw willpower. Yet, behind the granite facade of the legendary Iron Chancellor lay a deeply vulnerable, highly emotional human being plagued by chronic insomnia, agonizing physical pain, and a profound, volatile anxiety about the fragility of the state he had built. To view him solely as a cold, calculating machine of realpolitik is to miss the turbulent, hypersensitive soul of a country squire who conquered Europe because he was perpetually terrified of chaos. His journey began amid the wind-swept plains of Pomerania, where he was born into the Junker aristocracy in April 1815. Young Otto grew up under the stern gaze of an ambitious mother and the rustic traditions of Prussian landowners, developing an early contempt for weak authority and sentimental liberalism. During his university years, he earned the reputation of a reckless, wild hellion known as the Mad Bismarck, consuming vast quantities of alcohol, reading voraciously behind closed doors, and fighting nearly 30 university duels. This chaotic youth was not merely rebellious dissipation. It was the restless, untamed energy of an extraordinary intellect suffocating in the narrow confines of rural, provincial life. The turning point of his inner life arrived with his marriage to Johanna von Puttkamer in 1847. Hailing from a deeply pious, conservative, aristocratic family, Johanna provided the emotional anchor and spiritual sanctuary that Bismarck's turbulent psyche desperately needed. Their letters reveal a surprisingly tender, deeply affectionate partnership where the ruthless statesman confessed his deepest insecurities, bouts of depression, and spiritual doubts. Johanna tamed his wild edges, grounding his erratic emotions and channeling his fierce, destructive ambition into a disciplined, unyielding devotion to conservative statecraft and royal duty. When the democratic revolutions of 1848 swept across Europe, threatening to dismantle the traditional feudal order, Bismarck found his true ideological calling. While many old guard nobles panicked or compromised, a 33-year-old Bismarck rode into Berlin with guns and provisions, fiercely urging King Frederick William IV to crush the liberal uprising with military force. He viewed parliamentary democracy and popular sovereignty as a catastrophic recipe for national suicide, believing with absolute religious conviction that order could only be maintained through the unquestioned authority of the Prussian crown and the point of a sword. The decisive moment arrived in September 1862 when King Wilhelm I found himself locked in a bitter constitutional deadlock with the Prussian parliament over military budget reforms. Threatened with abdication by a despairing monarch, Bismarck was summoned to Berlin as minister-president. In his maiden speech to the Budget Committee, he delivered his infamous, electrifying manifesto. Germany would not look to Prussia's liberalism, but to its power. The great questions of the time would be decided not by speeches and majority votes. That was the great error of 1848 and 1849, but by iron and blood. True to his word, he simply collected taxes and governed without a legal budget for 4 years, crushing parliamentary opposition with sheer administrative brutality. Having secured domestic control, Bismarck turned his gaze outward, launching a masterclass in calculated aggression, starting with the Second Schleswig War in 1864. Teaming up with Austria to wrest the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein from Denmark, Bismarck deliberately engineered a joint administration that would inevitably generate friction with Vienna. He used the conflict to test the military reforms of General Helmuth von Moltke and Minister of War Albrecht von Roon, transforming the Prussian army into a modern, highly efficient killing machine, while carefully setting the trap for his Austrian allies. That trap snapped shut in the summer of 1866 during the Austro-Prussian War commonly known as the 7 Weeks' War. Utilizing rapid railroad deployment and needle guns, Prussian forces crushed the Austrian army at the decisive Battle of Sadowa in a blindingly fast campaign that stunned the capitals of Europe. Yet, true to his pragmatic genius, Bismarck shocked his own king and generals by demanding lenient peace terms with Vienna. Refusing to march triumphantly into Vienna or annex Austrian territory, he preserved future diplomatic flexibility, ensuring that Austria would not harbor a permanent burning desire for revenge. The victory over Austria allowed Bismarck to dissolve the old German Confederation and establish the North German Confederation, bringing northern and central German states firmly under Prussian dominance. To cement this new order, he executed a brilliant tactical stroke. He introduced universal male suffrage for the newly created Reichstag. While conservative elites were horrified by the idea of giving every working-class man a vote, Bismarck correctly calculated that the masses naturally respected traditional authority and would use the ballot box to reinforce, rather than weaken, executive power against liberal parliamentary interference. The final obstacle to complete unification was France under Emperor Napoleon III, who viewed a rising Prussia on his eastern border as an intolerable threat to French hegemony. Bismarck patiently manipulated the diplomatic chessboard, waiting for the right provocation. In July 1870, when a Hohenzollern prince was offered the Spanish throne, Bismarck seized the moment. By editing and sharply releasing a diplomatic telegram known as the Ems Dispatch, he deliberately inflamed national pride in both Paris and Berlin. As he predicted, a furious Napoleon III declared war, walking straight into a meticulously planned trap that instantly united all southern German states with Prussia in a patriotic frenzy. The Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1871 ended in catastrophic defeat for France. Surrounded by burning cities and captured armies, the French Empire collapsed, and on January 18, 1871, in the glittering Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, the German Empire was officially proclaimed. Otto von Bismarck, standing in his striking white military uniform amid cheering princes and generals, had achieved his life's ultimate masterpiece, a mighty, unified German superpower born out of battlefield blood and supreme diplomatic cunning. Domestically, however, Bismarck's paranoia about national unity manifested in aggressive campaigns of internal cleansing. He launched the Kulturkampf, a bitter, state-directed struggle against the political influence of the Catholic Church, fearing that Catholics held dual loyalties to Rome. When that campaign largely backfired, he pivoted his wrath toward the rapidly growing socialist movement. In the late 1870s, he outlawed the Social Democratic Party through harsh exceptional laws, while simultaneously introducing the world's first modern state social insurance system, accident, sickness, and old age pensions, in a cynical yet brilliant attempt to steal the socialist thunder and bind the working class in loyal dependence to the paternalistic state. Beneath the towering aura of invincibility, Bismarck's physical and mental health was a constant battlefield of hysterical extremes. He suffered from severe gastrointestinal illness, excruciating shingles, insomnia, and nervous exhaustion, frequently resorting to heavy drinking of strong ports and brandies to manage his pain. When political opposition frustrated him, he did not hesitate to weaponize his emotions, throwing legendary tantrums, smashing wine glasses, screaming at cabinet ministers, or bursting into torrential tears and threatening resignation to manipulate King Wilhelm I into submission. The precarious balance of his authoritarian system began to fracture following the death of old Emperor Wilhelm I in 1888 and the brief tragic reign of his liberal son, Frederick III, when the 29-year-old ambitious and psychologically unstable Kaiser Wilhelm II ascended the throne in June 1888. A generational collision of tectonic proportions became inevitable. The young monarch, eager to exercise personal rule and deeply resentful of being treated like a subordinate schoolboy by the aging chancellor, demanded absolute obedience and independent authority. The inevitable clash exploded in March 1890 over labor laws and cabinet procedures, culminating in Bismarck's forced resignation. Handed an unceremonious dismissal notice by an arrogant young Kaiser who was eager to drop the pilot, Bismarck left Berlin in a storm of bitterness and dark foreboding. He retired to his country estate in Friedrichsruh, spending his final years dictating his multi-volume memoirs, Gedanken und Erinnerungen, and issuing sharp prophetic warnings from the sidelines about the reckless, bombastic foreign policy of his successors, warnings that would tragically come true in 1914. Otto von Bismarck passed away on July 30, 1898, at the age of 83, leaving behind a monumental crypt in Friedrichsruh bearing the defiant inscription written by his own hand, "A loyal German servant of Emperor Wilhelm I." He remained a figure of staggering, irreconcilable contradictions, a fierce patriot and brilliant diplomat who gave birth to a great European nation, yet an inflexible authoritarian whose suppression of true democratic evolution left a dangerous political vacuum. Ultimately, the weeping, hypochondriac country squire and the ruthless architect of iron and blood were one and the same, a titan who reshaped the modern world through sheer force of will, leaving an indelible, complex mark upon European history.